Welcome to That Was the Week. It is October the 24th, Saturday afternoon at 2:52 here in Palo Alto, California. And today on That Was the Week, we are going to look at the news of the week. And this week, there are two topics that I want to share with you in News of the Week. The first is regarding how to go public and whether you should. And the second is about the Google antitrust case. But let's start with Bill Gurley.
Saying that companies need to go public sooner. Now we do see companies charging out of the gate. But when you look at how they're going out of the gate, I wonder if you think they're doing it the right way or not. For example, Snowflake going public, shares doubling on the first day of trading. Is that a victory or a miscalculation?
Well, look, I think any CEO that you talk to on the day of or day after a successful IPO is in a mindset of achievement and is not, and I completely understand this. They're not in a mindset of, oh, did I just make a mistake? But the process that we use to go public, if people spent the time to understand how it actually works, is the equivalent of using a paper map to do a 4-hour drive today. Like, there's just a much more elegant technology-enabled approach. And because of conflicts of interest and because there's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of people who want the broken process to exist and to continue. Unfortunately, it's getting worse. Snowflake alone was $4.5 billion. Just one company. And so the day after the IPO, the people that were allocated the stock the night before have $4.5 billion in wealth they didn't have before. And that money didn't just come out of nowhere. And unfortunately, the process is getting worse. We have a wonderful new age alternative called the direct listing that just matches supply and demand. That's how Palantir and Asana just went out on the backs of Spotify and Slack. So now we're getting some momentum around that. There's a small set of people that happen to be people that I highly respect. You know, and the public side, it's like Rich Barton and Mark Benioff and Reed Hastings and Toby at Shopify. And if you just do Google searches, you'll see they all say the exact same thing I'm saying, which is companies are too afraid to go public. And there are massive benefits to being first in category, being public, having control of the narrative with the buy side. Spencer Rascoff wrote a long blog post on this subject, which you could also go find and read. But there were voices in Silicon Valley about 5 or 10 years ago that I think were mostly raising late stage funds and wanted to kind of pick off the investments before they got public that started this stay private longer thing. But I've always equated it to, I always like the analogy of football, which is if there were some college quarterback that was, you know, in the top 50 list of the draft that held a press conference and said, you know, I don't think I'm going to go into the NFL yet because I'm really afraid of scrutiny. And, you know, they track every single stat, and I don't want to be that short-term oriented. If someone did that, they would fall immediately. But that's the behavior of some of the founders in Silicon Valley that buy into this stay private thing. Like, the minute you started giving stock to your employees, you're in the game. And your job is to maximize shareholder value for all your constituents, your investors, your employees, everything else. And so if you don't want to keep raising your game, you know, you should sell your company or maybe consider hiring a CEO that is.
Whoa. So you either do it Bill's way or replace yourself. He's basically talking about his anger at IPOs. And he's favoring what he calls a new modern streamlined way, direct listings to take a company public. That is the theme of this week's newsletter. You can go and get it yourself at thatwastheweek.com. You can sign up to get it in your email every week. You can even pay me for that, although it's free. If you want to pay, you can. All change in Silicon Valley is the theme this week. And Bill's comments are only part of it, although he clearly is he clearly is very, very opinionated, as this quote shows. He says, at this point, the IPO process is financially brain dead. And he goes on to state that, referring to that 4.5 billion that Snowflake put in the pockets of investors who bought the shares from Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs prior to the IPO, that money is basically being stolen out of the pockets of founders and employees. And he goes on to say that that could be a violation of fiduciary duty. Now, with all due respect to Bill, he's completely wrong. There's nothing against fiduciary duty by doing an IPO. And the money that was put into the pockets of investors was not stolen. Or if it was, direct listings also steal money, and so do SPACs. Why? Well, let's explain. Before an IPO, shares are sold always in all types of IPO, whether it's an IPO of the normal kind, in which case the shares are bought from Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and the bankers who are doing the IPO. In a direct listing, the one Bill favors, shares are also bought before the IPO, except they're bought by late stage investors, venture funds, growth funds, PE funds, hedge funds, endowments, pension funds, and the like. They buy before the IPO. And in the case of SPACs, the SPAC organizers and the people who they raise money from buy shares before the IPO, in the SPAC in this case, and then go and merge with the company. In all three cases, the people who bought before the IPO make money. So if that represents stealing, all three are stealing. Of course, it doesn't represent stealing. It represents making a bet on the outcome of an IPO, and there's three different ways to do it. The Wall Street Journal this week talks about SPACs. SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company, and it's an amazing invention. Here's how it works. Chamath Palihapitiya will go out and create a SPAC. He gives them names: IPO A, IPO B, IPO C. And the SPAC raises money from investors, somewhere between 300 million and sometimes over $1 billion. That money sits in the SPAC, and the SPAC becomes public on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. And it looks for a company to merge with. The company that it merges with gets the cash, and the SPAC is a part owner in the now public entity, the merged entity. And the SPAC organizers typically retain a decent percentage of that publicly listed company without having put any money in the first place. That's a SPAC. Wall Street Journal says that the rise of SPACs involves handing over money in a blind faith investment, which is kind of true. You're giving money to a SPAC and you don't yet know which company they're going to merge with. Because interest rates are close to zero and are likely to remain that way, lots of investors are swinging for the fences in the equity market, both in IPOs and direct listings and SPACs. And the Wall Street Journal makes the point that the holding periods and the attention spans are getting shorter. The SPAC becomes an ultimate form of immediate gratification. And now that's really true. If Chamath went and raised a venture fund of several hundred million, it would take him 5 years to invest it, and then at least another 5 years before he saw a return on it. And he'd get 20% of the money he raised in fees over 10 years, and he'd get 20% of the profit. In the case of a SPAC, the maximum length of time is 2 years that it takes to find a merged company and go public. And so he can take several $100 million and turn it into a lot more than that, much more quickly. And so if you are offered the chance to raise a venture fund and invest it, or to raise a SPAC and find a company to merge with, the latter certainly is financially faster and more effective. What all of this represents is a massive change in late stage investing. You know, for the last 10 years or more, late stage investing has mainly taken place when a company was private. and most value was grown during the private phase of a company, like say in the case of Airbnb, which is still private. But with SPACs and with direct listings, increasingly companies are going public earlier. And this week, Thomas Tungers, who is at Redpoint, the venture capital fund, wrote a story explaining why. And he makes the point that the public markets are crediting companies that are growing by 50% or more a year with multiples at least 6 times greater than has previously been the case, and certainly greater multiples than the private markets are giving them. And this is leading to lots of companies with growth wanting to go public, which has been something they've been resisting up until recently. So go and read Thomas's article. It's in the newsletter. It really explains a lot about what is going on. So that is news of the week number one. The tier take on all of that is that if you have a company that's growing, go public. You can go public through any of the 3 routes. They'll all be fine for you. You'll get money onto your balance sheet. You'll be able to execute against the plan of your company. The only variable, and it is the only variable, is who are your pre-IPO investors that get to make money as your stock rises. And frankly, I don't think you care that much. It's all about the deal terms, the ease of the process. Those are the main criteria. There should be no religion at all about IPOs versus direct listings versus SPACs. And that is the tier take for this week. Our second news of the week story relates to Google. We can spend a little bit less time on this, but Tim Wu is featured in the newsletter, and he has a very sober take on what is going on with the Department of Justice and the 11 Republican state attorneys who are accusing Google of being monopoly. He helps us understand that they're accused of being in violation of Section 2 of the Sherman Act, which ever since 1890 has made it illegal to monopolize or attempt to monopolize a market or an industry. Now, the accusation against Google is that they're a monopoly in search. Well, it's kind of an interesting point because search isn't something Google charges for. And so arguably it isn't a market. What is their market is advertising. And in that market, they're under severe competition, have been losing market share for years now, mainly to Facebook. And their cost per click that they've been able to charge for advertising has been declining quarter after quarter after quarter. If you go and look at their earnings reports, you'll see that that's a constant conversation between them and the analysts that cover them. So Google is clearly not a monopoly in advertising, its main market. And in search, the reason that it's so dominant isn't because it's abusing monopoly power, it's because it's the best. The PageRank algorithm that Larry Page and Sergey Brin created back in the early to mid 1990s, actually late 1990s, was and is the best way to rank search results. And so Tim Wu says here, in this case, there's very little evidence that Apple, Samsung, or whoever uses the Google search engine strongly wanted to use the great Bing search engine or featured DuckDuckGo, the alternatives, only to have Google bribe them not to. In other words, they were glad to use Google search because they thought it was the best and they were happy to have the money as well. So Google clearly isn't having to twist anybody's arm to implement Google search. When you use it on your iPhone in Safari, it's because it's the best. And let's face it, we don't change it for another one because there isn't a better one. And that's why Google is in the position it's in. And the Tim Wu take on that is also the tier take. Now the newsletter, for those who don't know about the newsletter, it actually has 3 other sections that I want to highlight. Let's just have a quick look. The news of the week is followed by worth a mention. And worth a mention looks at other main stories of the week that pass by me. I probably read about 300 to 400 stories a day. I spend about an hour every morning catching up, and I probably save between 3 and 5 stories each day. Here's the 10 best of the week that cover venture startups investing. There's a story about Quibi and why it crashed. A great survey of European venture capital by Jenny Tier, my wife, actually. A really interesting story about a venture fund that raised 400 million from Harvard and Stanford only to invest it all in Bitcoin. Andreessen Horowitz explaining why it's better to invent something that doesn't exist than to iterate on something that does. If you're an innovator, really good advice for founders. Storytelling is going to be really important to you being able to raise money for that. There's a great article by the Harvard Business Review on storytelling, a couple of articles on remote working, and also what's called people analytics, which is about monitoring remote workers, both a good and a bad thing, clearly. Andrew Sullivan on wokeness and why it's winning, why Chinese firms are listing on the US exchange, and why Tesla is a chain of startups, according to Elon Musk. All of them great reads. Last week on the show, we talked about the FCC saying it was going to reinterpret the meaning of Section 230 of the Communications Act to force onto Facebook and Twitter and other social media platforms behavior. That was in response to the Biden's son hard drive story in the New York Post and the reaction Twitter and Facebook had to that. Mike Masnick, who featured last week, responds this week, claiming that the FCC is going way beyond its normal role in trying to do that. And at the same time, a really good article from Ben Thompson from Stratechery on Twitter and why it shouldn't be intervening. David Sachs on the same story, and the Wall Street Journal on Mark Zuckerberg. And in our startups of the week this week, we've got 3. The former CIO of Tesla is raising 150 million, has raised 150 million to revolutionize car dealership software. I think we'd all love that. Airbnb, a story from Scott Galloway, known to his friends as Prof. Galloway, about Airbnb's IPO forthcoming and why, with 7 million properties under management, which compares to all the top hotels between them only having 4.5 million rooms, the Airbnb is going to be the most valuable travel company in the world, despite coronavirus and all the challenges they've had. And Handshake, focused on college recruiting, raising 80 million. Those are this week's startups of the week. So with worth a mention, echoes from last week, and startup of the week, those are the main sections of this week's newsletter. Hope you're going to enjoy that. Let's move to a new section called Ask Me Anything. And on Ask Me Anything, this is a place where you can go to the Telegram chat channel. It's t.me/thatwastheweek. And you can either video yourself, in which case I'll put you on the show, or write me some questions and I will answer them. And this week, Andrew Keene has a question.
Keith, it's certainly been quite a week in tech, and the question this week that really intrigues me most of all is PayPal's embrace of crypto, or seeming embrace. What I don't understand, and perhaps you can explain this to me, is how you can use crypto to pay for things. So if I want to buy a new iPhone or a new camera, or if I want to buy some food online, a restaurant takeaway, or some tickets or a subscription, how do I use crypto? My understanding is that crypto is not a currency. So this supposed marriage between PayPal and crypto seems to me to be somewhat forced and weird. Perhaps you can explain that to me in this week in which everybody at least is saying that crypto hit mainstream?
Great question, Andrew. So the first thing is, I'm sure not everyone's familiar with crypto. Crypto describes a lot of different things, from Bitcoin, which probably you've heard about, Ethereum, which you may not have heard about, all the way through to what are called stable coins like USDC, USDT, and others. The distributed finance network, DeFi, where you can earn up to between 10 and 20% interest annually on storing your wealth in stable coins like USDT and USDC. So crypto describes a lot of things. There are billions and billions of dollars held in crypto. And this week, PayPal announced that they're going to make it possible for you to spend crypto to buy things. And the way they're doing that is acting as a middleman. A merchant will sell you something for, let's say, $100. You can pay in 100 USDC or $100 worth of Bitcoin for that. PayPal will take the crypto from you and they'll give the merchant real dollars, and they'll act as the intermediary. Why will they do that? Well, they can make money on the transaction. That would be the difference in the exchange rate. Like any exchange between any two currencies, they can make a margin there. And there's no reason on earth why crypto shouldn't be in that basket of currencies that they can let you spend. And so that's what they're planning to do. Coinbase has been doing this for a long time. They have a whole section called Coinbase Commerce. And in fact, you can, if you want, pay for my newsletter in Bitcoin by using Coinbase Commerce. Just ask me for the link on the Telegram channel. I'll give you it. Charge nothing for the newsletter, by the way. You should go there and subscribe. It's free. But I do say that if you want to pay, I'll welcome it, and it'll make it easy for me to keep doing it. $9 a month, or $90 a year, and you can pay in Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other cryptocurrency supported by Coinbase. So Andrew, thanks for the question. That's how they enable you to pay in crypto. And now we're moving to our tweet of the week. And the tweet of the week this week is from Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks is 94 years young, and this is what he had to say on his video.
Hi folks, I'm Mel Brooks, and behind me you see my son and my grandson, and they can't be with me. Why? Because of this coronavirus. And Donald Trump's not doing a damn thing about it. So many people have died. And when you're dead, you can't do much. So I'm voting for Joe Biden. I like Joe. Why do I like Joe? Because Joe likes facts. Because Joe likes science. Joe will keep us going. Take a tip from me. Vote for Joe. Okay, that's all I've got to say. Okay, you can leave. Thank you. Thank you. See you soon. I got to fill out my ballot. See you later. Bye-bye. Yeah, I love you too. That was good.
And that's the tweet of the week, because Marty Feldman is saying go vote, and I agree with him. Go vote. See you next week on That Was the Week. Bye for now.